Imagine a rainy Tuesday evening, the kind where the world feels heavy and cold, but inside a small diner called the Golden Spoon, a moment of pure, radiant kindness unfolds that will leave you breathless. Welcome to Midnight Tales, where we uncover stories that remind us of the beauty in humanity. Tonight, I'm sharing a tale that proves the smallest act of compassion can spark a fire of hope, even for someone who seems to have it all. Picture this: a billionaire, dressed in a suit worth more than most people's cars, sits alone in a corner booth, his hands trembling as he struggles to lift a simple fork. Parkinson's disease has stolen his ability to feed himself with ease, and the weight of that loss is heavier than any fortune he's amassed. Around him, the diner hums with life, truckers sipping coffee, families laughing over pie, but whispers and stares begin to pierce the air as people notice his struggle. Some even pull out their phones, eager to capture his vulnerability for a quick laugh or a cruel post. But then, a waitress named Grace, with tired eyes and a flour-dusted apron, steps in. What she does next doesn't just change his night, it reshapes his entire world and mine, too. Stick with us on Midnight Tales as we dive into this unforgettable story of courage, connection, and the power of a single kind act. Where are you watching from tonight? Drop it in the comments below. The Golden Spoon wasn't a place you'd expect to find someone like David Hartwell. No velvet ropes, no Michelin stars, just a cozy, worn-in diner where the coffee's strong, the booths are a little sticky, and the fluorescent lights hum a familiar tune. It's the kind of spot where locals gather for meatloaf and memories, where the jukebox plays songs from a decade ago, and the air smells like fresh pie and second chances. David, a 42-year-old tech titan who built an empire from a single laptop, had been driving aimlessly through the rain, escaping the sting of a brutal board meeting. His hands, once steady enough to sign billion-dollar deals, now betrayed him with every movement. Parkinson's was rewriting his story, one tremor at a time. The boardroom had been merciless, whispers behind manicured hands, eyes darting away when his coffee cup clattered, voices halting when his words slurred under the weight of his medication. Exhausted and raw, he pulled into the diner's gravel lot, drawn to its warm glow like a moth to a flame. Inside, the scene was alive with the quiet chaos of a Tuesday night. Construction workers traded jokes over burgers, an elderly couple shared a slice of cherry pie, and a young mom coaxed her toddler to try a carrot. David slipped into a corner booth, hoping to disappear into the hum of it all. Then came Grace, the waitress with auburn hair tied back in a no-nonsense ponytail and eyes that sparkled with quiet strength. Her name tag gleamed under the diner's lights, and her smile carried the warmth of someone who'd seen life's highs and lows but still chose kindness. "What'll it be, hun?" she asked, her voice like a warm blanket on a chilly night. David ordered meatloaf, mashed potatoes, and green beans, simple, comforting, nothing that required a knife or finesse. When Grace set the steaming plate in front of him, he waited until she turned away before picking up his fork. That's when the battle began. His hand, once a tool of precision, now shook with a mind of its own. A scoop of mashed potatoes wobbled, then fell back to the plate. A green bean slipped from the fork, rolling across the table like a tiny taunt. David's jaw tightened, his focus narrowing to the impossible task of feeding himself. At a nearby table, a man nudged his wife, pointing with a smirk. Whispers rippled through the diner, and a phone's flash cut through the dim light, followed by a stifled laugh. David's cheeks burned with a familiar shame. He'd stopped eating in public months ago for exactly this reason, because the world, so quick to celebrate his success, was even quicker to mock his weakness. He was a billionaire, a name in headlines, yet here he was, undone by a fork full of potatoes. But Grace saw something different. From across the diner, she watched not with pity or curiosity, but with a quiet understanding forged by her own life's battles. After 15 years of waitressing, she developed a sixth sense for people carrying invisible burdens. She noticed David's careful choice of a corner booth, the way he waited for her to leave before attempting to eat. She saw the pride in his eyes, the same pride her father had worn during his decade-long fight with multiple sclerosis. Grace remembered how her dad had stopped joining family dinners in his final years, too stubborn to let anyone see him struggle with a spoon. She saw that same stubborn spark in David, and it stirred something deep within her. The diner wasn't kind that night. A man at table 6 snapped another photo, his grin sharp and mean. A teenage girl by the window mimicked David's tremors, giggling with her friend. Grace's hands clenched into fists beneath her apron. She'd seen cruelty before, thoughtless comments, careless stares, but this felt personal. David had managed only a few bites in 20 minutes, his shoulders hunched as if shielding himself from the world. When he knocked over his water glass, ice scattering like tiny accusations, the laughter from nearby tables grew bolder. That was it. Grace had had enough. She crossed the diner with purpose, grabbing a fresh napkin as she approached David's booth. "Happens to everyone," she said softly, mopping up the spill with the ease of someone who'd cleaned 1,000 messes. "My dad used to say dignity's not about never stumbling, it's about how you stand back up." David looked up, startled by her words, and found no pity in her eyes, only a quiet strength that felt like a lifeline. "Meatloaf's getting cold," she said, glancing at his plate. "I'm due for a break soon. Mind if I join you? I hate eating alone, and you seem like you've got stories worth hearing." Her invitation wasn't charity, it was connection, and David felt the difference deep in his chest. He nodded, unable to speak, as something warm flickered in a heart that had grown cold. Before he could say more, the man from table 6 swaggered over, phone raised like a weapon. "Hey, you're David Hartwell, right? The tech guy. This is too good." His voice dripped with mockery, each word a jab at David's pride. The diner fell silent, all eyes on the unfolding scene. David's face flushed, his hands trembling harder under the weight of humiliation. But Grace stepped forward, her small frame radiating a quiet fury that filled the room. "Sir," she said, her voice steady as steel, "put the phone away and go back to your seat. This is a family diner, and we don't tolerate harassment." The man scoffed, but Grace didn't flinch. "What I see," she said, her voice rising just enough to carry, "is a man trying to enjoy his meal in peace, just like you were 5 minutes ago." Her gaze swept the room, locking eyes with the Gawkers. "Just like all of you." The air shifted. Betty, Grace's co-worker, appeared at her side, arms crossed, her glare sharp enough to cut glass. The manager, a bear of the man who'd hired Grace for her ability to handle tough moments, stepped out from the kitchen, his presence a silent warning. "The lady said put the phone away," he said, his voice low but firm. "I suggest you listen." The man hesitated, then lowered his phone and slunk back to his table, the weight of the diner's disapproval heavy on his shoulders. The hum of conversation resumed, softer now, with a few patrons casting apologetic glances David's way. Grace slid into the booth across from him, her heart still pounding from the confrontation. David's shoulders shook, not from his illness but from the weight of emotion he'd held back for months. "I'm sorry you had to see that," he whispered. "I'm sorry you had to defend me like I'm." "Stop," Grace said gently, her voice a balm. "My dad taught me something when he was sick. Accepting help doesn't make you helpless, it makes you human. We all need each other sometimes." She gestured to his plate. "Betty's meatloaf is legendary, and it's a crime to let it go cold. Let's fix that, yeah?" David looked at her, gratitude and confusion warring in his eyes. "Why are you doing this? You don't even know me." Grace's smile was warm, unguarded. "I know you're someone having a tough day, trying to enjoy a meal. That's enough for me." Without hesitation, she picked up his fork, cut a small piece of meatloaf, and held it out with the ease of someone sharing a bite with a friend. "Betty swears there's love in this recipe," she said, her tone light, "but I'm betting on brown sugar and a dash of Worcestershire." David hesitated, then accepted the bite. The meatloaf was warm, savory, perfect, but the real warmth came from the act itself, simple and profound. For the first time in months, he didn't feel like a billionaire or a patient. He just felt human. "Your dad," he said softly. How did he deal with it? Losing control. Grace cut another piece, this time with creamy mashed potatoes. He fought it at first, pushed everyone away until he was too tired to fight anymore. Then my mom got sick, not bad, just a flu, but I had to come home from college to help. I was so angry, you know. Angry at him, at the world. But then I realized I wasn't losing him, I was finding him in a new way. As she helped him eat, Grace shared stories of her father, his stubborn pride, his quiet regrets, the dreams he'd shared in their final months together. David listened, each bite easier than the last, the diner's noise fading into the background. Their booth became a sanctuary, a place where vulnerability wasn't a weakness but a bridge. Those months with my dad, Grace said, offering a sip of water, they were some of the best we ever had. Not because he was sick, but because we were honest with each other. David finished his meal, the first full meal he'd eaten in public in months, and felt a crack in the wall he'd built around himself. This wasn't pity. This was connection, raw and real. Thank you, he said, his voice thick with meaning. Not just for the food, but for reminding me I am still me. Grace smiled, stacking his empty plate. We're all just people, hun. Rich, poor, healthy, sick, we're all trying to keep a little dignity. That's what makes us human. If this story's touching your heart, hit that like button and subscribe to Midnight Tales for more stories that remind us of the power of kindness. Drop a comment, have you ever witnessed a moment like this? 3 months later, David returned to the Golden Spoon, not as a man hiding from the world but as one embracing it. His steps were steadier, his smile brighter, and he carried a small wrapped gift. Grace spotted him and hurried over, coffee pot in hand, her grin as warm as ever. Well, look who's back. Feeling okay, hun? Better, David said, and he meant it. New medication had eased his tremors, but the real change was deeper. He'd hired an aide, not as a surrender but as a choice to focus on what mattered. He'd joined a Parkinson's support group, finding strength in shared stories. Most importantly, he'd transformed his company, launching programs to support employees with disabilities and hiring inclusively. The board had balked, but soaring morale and profits silenced their doubts. I brought you something, David said, sliding the gift across the table. Inside was a silver locket, engraved with "Dignity shared is dignity multiplied." Grace opened it to find a photo of her father, pulled from her social media, and an inscription honoring his lessons of love and action. Tears welled in her eyes. How did you? I wanted to honor him, David said simply, and thank you for sharing his wisdom when I needed it most. They talked for an hour, swapping stories like old friends. Grace shared her dream of studying nursing, fueled by her father's legacy and a mysterious scholarship that had arrived in her mailbox. David spoke of his support group and his company's new path. When he left, he tucked a tip under his plate, enough to cover Grace's rent for months, but the real gift was the connection they'd forged. As David walked to his car, his hands still trembled slightly, but he moved with a confidence he hadn't felt in years. Grace watched him go, thinking of her father and how proud he'd be to know his lessons had rippled outward, touching a stranger's life. The Golden Spoon kept serving its honest food to honest people, but it now held the memory of a night when two souls met in vulnerability and left stronger. This is Midnight Tales, where we celebrate the moments that remind us we're all connected. Like, comment, and subscribe for more stories that prove kindness is the greatest wealth of all. Thank you for joining us. Let's keep spreading light together.